Hello everybody and welcome to Sinfin Moor Allotments, and you're joining us on our Grow With Us project. We're doing Series 1 and we're now into episode 2 of runner beans. Before we start, I just would like to say we are still in lockdown, and just so you know, we are definitely keeping our social distancing, aren't we, Kevin?
That's right.
We must be at least 4 metres away, I'd say now.
Easy.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
so everybody's safe, let's carry on. So today we're going to be talking about your plants. So the last series that we did, the last episode that we did, we were showing you how to make your little pots out of the newspaper, how to fill them, how to plant your beans. This is the one we did at the last filming. Now these are probably going to be way ahead of yours because we actually launched the video probably a couple of weeks after we actually did the filming. So these are going to be a little bit ahead of yours. Don't worry, if yours are just coming through the surface, or they're 1 inch high, 2 inches high, or even they could be this high. Every bean grows differently, so don't worry about it. They don't need to be in the ground anyway until the very end of May, so you'll all be safe and they'll all be ready for then. At the moment we're talking of the very beginning of May, so that you know your plants have easily got another 3 weeks of growth. Keep them watered, keep them moist, keep the paper nice and moist as well, and they'll soon look like this. We'll come back to these later, Kevin.
Right.
One thing I do want to try and say, that obviously beans need something to grow up, and they grow really tall and they hang on to something. They self-cling, you don't need to tie them on, and they have canes to climb up. So what we do is we get the longest canes we can get hold of. These ones are 2.4 metres. I'll just show you. They're really tall, a lot taller than me. Now, obviously, if we needed to tie these up, I can't even reach that, so I've come up with a little way to help me when I'm planting these out in the ground, just to help me keep them together, and that's just by a piece of string. I've got a piece of crocheted wool here, and all I'm going to do, if you can imagine a wigwam, it has the bits crisscross, so take a distance down wherever you feel, tie a nice, I would do a knot, to be honest, Kevin, nice and tight, so they've got a little bit of room so that when you're moving them around later you can do. So we'll leave that there, and that's going to help us later when we actually go to planting. So we've now tied our canes together and we need to put them in the ground. So this is the next part of it. First of all, that's quite important, wherever you're going to grow them, just make sure that your soil is nice and turned over. So they just need a small dig. You don't have to do your whole garden. You only have to do a certain area that's going to be big enough for your wigwam to go into. So just make sure that you work all the area around and you give it a good dig and break up the lumps really. The beans won't really like really hard lumps, so break it all up. If you've got any nice compost, you can throw that in, it'll break it down. That would be lovely. And once that's done, just sort of level it all out, and then you're ready to start putting your wigwam in. So this is the canes that we tied together earlier, and this is why I do it. Can you see how high that is? So I'm going to be struggling. If these were all loose, they would be everywhere. So I've designed this little hack, which works for me, to do that. If you're a very tall bloke, then maybe you don't need that bit. So I kind of work out where the centre point's going to be. I reckon about there, don't you, Kevin?
Yep.
And then literally just tap it into the ground, nothing high, and gradually you just start feeding them out. Try and sort of follow where your string's going if you can. They get a bit tangled up now and again. So just don't hold them tightly, just hold them loosely. You're not at this point trying to shove them in the ground. You're literally just sort of walking the little legs out basically. It's almost like some sort of alien that you're trying to put into the ground, and if you can actually look up, you'll be able to see where your little string's going, and it'll all work out fine. Though this one here, look, is better if it was over there. So there you go. So you're now starting to walk them out. You can come round, keep pulling them out, keep going. It's a bit of a fiddle, but it's a lot easier than having 8 canes all going all over the place. And you keep literally walking them out, little bit at a time, little bit further. Keep checking at the top that they're all in line, because otherwise if you're trying to put them where they don't want to go, you'll find they'll break. Once you've got to the kind of sort of circular circumference that you're happy with, you can now start to just actually ease them into the ground. So each go round, sort of space them nicely and just push them into the ground. I think a bit of stone there. Whoop. Yep, guess what? A stone. I'll move that one. So that one goes in there. Just slowly pull them in, and as you're doing, you can just literally separate them out. So these three here, look, are a little bit close to one another. So I'm going to just pull that one nice and gently. Whoops. And push them down into the ground, little bit at a time, all of them. I'm still struggling with this one, Kevin. I'm going to move him completely.
Right.
I think there's a brick. There we go. Just a little bit at a time. Because they're tied together, you have to do them one at a time, just a little bit. Keep pushing them in. That one's being a pain. And then you get to the point where they're all quite rigid now. That's quite tight. If for some reason your string breaks, always have a spare piece of string, because if it did break, once they're in the ground, they will pretty much stay in place. It'll make it a lot easier. And then you could at least just put another bow on there if you have to. I'm quite lucky that one didn't break, so we're okay. So now you've got your ground set. So the beans now will happily grow up this. Now, when you now come to plant the beans, so we'll take a bean pod. Because you've made them into these beautiful little paper pods, the great thing is we don't need to take this paper off. The roots will actually quite happily grow through the paper, and this will keep it nice and moist and carry on feeding it until you're happy. Now, one thing I do is if the roots haven't come through the bottom yet, is I tend to just open up the bottom little bit before I plant them out, just to give it a little bit of a help, but it's not necessary at all. And then the other thing I do is sometimes I rip the top so that it goes down to the soil line as well. So, because you don't want, out of the soil, you don't want your paper showing, because that dries out and then the dryness will just follow it all the way down. So make sure that there's a little bit there. So that's basically what I'll be planting in a second. Now, I was going to grab something to kneel on. Most people that I've seen tend to plant their beans at the bottom of every cane. My father-in-law gave me a very good tip. He said beans like to grow upwards until they hit something, then they'll catch onto it and they'll be fine. Always plant your beans behind the cane, not in front of the cane, because already, as you can see, this bean is pretty much touching the cane. So that's a tip I've always used, and I think it's a great tip. Right, so when you dig anything, you need it to be a little bit deeper than what you've ended up with now on this pot. I'm just going to put him down there. Dig a little hole. Now, beans are very hungry, so you will need to keep feeding them. So it might be worth getting hold of something like a really good tomato feed or general purpose plant feed, and do that once a week once they start growing. The first 4 weeks you won't need to do anything. Also, just to start them off as well, I've got some compost in here. For each one I'm just going to put a big handful of compost into the bottom of the hole, and then place my little bean. Now bear in mind as well, all of the beans will grow different ways, so if you want it to catch on to this as soon as possible, so I'm not going to have it so it's facing away. I'm actually going to turn it, because it's actually turning that way already. So when I plant that in, that bean is now already leaning towards that, and I'll show you another one in a minute what will happen to that. So once that's in, you don't have to have it tied to you don't have to do any of that, you don't have to tie it. Fold all the soil around it, all the way in. Any lumps, break those up, and then firm it down nice and firmly, and make sure you can't see any of your paper. Just cover it up if you can, because you don't want your paper to dry out. Now you can see that's quite nice, and it's growing towards, I reckon, a week. That'll already have its little tiny feelers out, and it'll be starting to grow up. If I can actually show you, I'll just go and get this one. Hold on, Kevin. These ones here that are a little bit older than the ones I'm planting at the moment are a better way to show you what I'm trying to say. So once that's kind of a newer one, and it's not as big as these. So if I can take, let's say, this one out. So I'm not sure you'll see from there, Kevin, because obviously we must be at least 6 metres away from each other at the moment. But we've actually got roots coming through the bottom of this one. I'll just open it up. You see that there? And you can see, perhaps on against my jumper, that's a root. Can you see that? So that's showing through. And sometimes you get roots coming out the sides. That's fine. So basically, I'll just open this one up. Oh, there's lots of roots on this one. Absolutely loads of roots at the bottom of here. I'll just show you carefully without breaking them. You don't have to take the bottoms off. Once the roots are coming through, you can see that, Kevin. Yep. Loads of roots. Yep. Right, so what we've got here, this little tiny one, is basically these first 2 leaves here. And then what it will do is sends this, you can see it if I turn it around, this centre, there's a little centre one growing up. That's your main stem. Now this main stem just keeps growing up, and as that grows up, that's the one that will twine itself around the cane and keep going. This is important that you know which one this one is. Can't really fail, because it's always the last one, it's the one that keeps going up. What will happen is, over time, as they grow, they'll obviously keep going up and up and up, and they would keep going. They don't stop really, but you want them to stop. So, because there's no point in having them falling over the top. So what you need to do is, as this is growing up the pole, when it reaches about that height, and then you've got your little bit there that's now at that height, you snap that off. Now by doing that, you literally snap that top end off. That will stop it going any higher, and all the energy then will be put into the rest of the growth all the way down the cane. It'll produce beautiful flowers, which the bees love, by the way, and every flower that it produces will also produce a bean, a runner bean. And the great thing about runner beans, when you start picking them, they will keep growing. So the more you pick, the more you'll get. So that's basically very important. So at the first, when you plant them, you might only have 2. The centre one is the most important, grows to the top. Nip it off when it's at the height that you want to stop it at. And you can, because it's a wigwam, you can actually stop it a little bit sooner, because you've got them all coming to one point. It's quite busy up there anyway, so you could stop them a bit lower if you wanted to. And that's basically how you plant them. There are obviously lots of other ways to be able to stand your canes up. What you could do, you can have a frame where you can just have them in a flat and they're sort of leaning to. And then, well, there's other ways. Lots of people do it differently on the plots, but this is quite a nice way for your back garden. It doesn't take up too much room. The plants are on the inside of the cane, so you know pretty much that's the kind of area that you'll be looking at. Next video we'll be doing is hopefully be able to see all of this grown up. We've got beautiful beans growing. We're going to show you when's the right time to harvest them, how to prepare them, and how to cook them. Okay, until next time, say goodbye, Kevin.
Goodbye, Kevin. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah, bye-bye.